Anxiety is one of those conditions that keeps you from showing up as your best self. Whether it's in a job interview, trying to connect with friends, or even being with your family, that ability to just show up and express who you are on the inside just gets completely flattened when you're in the crushing grips of an anxiety spell. So if you struggle with anxiety, watch this video and learn the steps to rewire your brain to reduce your anxiety and avoid the mistakes that will cost you time and money. Hey, I'm Dr. Sam McDonald. I'm a brain health expert, and this channel is dedicated to helping you rewire your brain so that you can live a better life. If you love this content, make sure to like and subscribe so you get the notifications for each week's new video. In order to get your anxiety under control, you need to consider and understand 3 different parts of the brain that are mainly responsible for anxiety. That is your limbic system, your frontal lobes, aka your prefrontal cortex, and your parasympathetic system. So a brief overview of each of these. Your limbic system is also known as the survival part of your brain. This is also your stress center. This is responsible for your fight or flight response. So this is your survival mode. Your prefrontal cortex, this is your executive function. We also call it your experience simulator. And this is intricately tied to your limbic system, which we'll talk about later. But this main job of this part of your brain is your rational thought. So it makes us human, and it's really what we are. The last part is your parasympathetic system. This is the resting, relaxation. We call this healing mode. So if the limbic system is the gas pedal, the parasympathetic system is the brake pedal. They're going to work in tandem as well. So to understand each of these, you need to understand the direct connections and the indirect connections to each of these. But we'll start first with understanding the frontal lobe, your prefrontal cortex, and the limbic system. So your limbic system is going to activate in instances of stress and in instances of danger. It's always looking for threat, and it's your survival mechanisms in your brain. It's really responsible for keeping you alive. The opposite side of that is your prefrontal cortex. Again, this is your experience simulator. This is what's going to help to look at your environment when your fight or flight system turns on, and it's going to say, no, everything's okay. There's no danger here. I don't need to be in this defense mode. So they work in tandem, almost like a teeter totter. So as the prefrontal cortex activates and it says, hey, no, everything's cool, chill out, it's going to turn that limbic system off. On the flip side, as that limbic system turns on, it's going to start to shut down that prefrontal cortex. That's why if you ever get into those really massive anxiety spells, or even if you ever had a fight with somebody, that rational thought goes right out the window because you're only thinking from that survival center in your brain. You're no longer thinking from your higher brain centers, that prefrontal cortex. Now, the concern with this, what can happen is if you're stuck in that chronic fight or flight cycle often or daily, what's going to happen is your brain is going to start to rewire. It's going to look for the most energy efficient routes when it's utilizing different neural networks. So it's going to start to rewire, and it's going to keep that limbic system on more often. And it's actually going to physically grow in size. So because more blood and more information is going to this part of the brain, it's going to get bigger. The counteractor to that is the prefrontal cortex. That new higher brain center is going to start to shrink. So it's going to start to dampen, it's going to start to turn off, and it's not going to be working as well, which means your executive functions, your memory, your ability to rationally think about things in the future is all going to be diminished because you no longer have that brain center working as well. So it's really important to understand if you're trying to rewire your brain to be less anxious, it's going to take time and it's going to take repetition. That's the language of the brain, is repetition. So you're going to have to be very consistent with taking care of yourself to start to rewire that part of the brain. So it's going to take time for it to say, hey, look, this is really important. Now, the other thing to really consider when you're trying to turn on more of that prefrontal cortex or that frontal lobe is you need to activate the parasympathetic system, and specifically you need to activate the vagus nerve. Your vagus nerve is the main nerve for that parasympathetic healing mode, which means it's going to have direct connections into that frontal lobe brain. So things like deep belly breathing, getting outside and grounding yourself in the grass, ice baths, cold showers, all those things are really good at activating the parasympathetic system and that vagus nerve. We also use a lot of things like humming or breathing or vibration on the throat are all going to be really great methods for activating that vagus nerve. And that's one of the big things that you want to do in order to start to rewire that frontal lobe and shutting off the anxious fight or flight response. So by activating that vagus nerve, you're going to start to bring balance back into that teeter-totter state. You'll start to shut off that limbic system, and your brain's going to start to make new connections, and it's going to start to strengthen that frontal lobe again. So it's really important to be consistent with that, really important to activate that parasympathetic system to really shut off those anxiety responses. And over time, that anxiety that you experience every single day is going to start to melt away. So on that note, you should be healthy by choice, not by chance. And for that reason, I will see you on the next video.